The story of Burkina Faso today is inseparable from the spirit of courage and defiance that animates its people. In a land scarred by decades of exploitation, both internal and external, a new figure rose not from foreign halls of power or dynasties of privilege, but from the soil of struggle, from the heartbeat of ordinary citizens who demanded change. He came not as a polished politician molded by elites, but as a soldier molded by duty, sacrifice, and an unshakable belief in the dignity of his nation. Burkina Faso, long celebrated as the land of upright people, found itself on the edge of collapse. For years, foreign interference, corruption, insecurity, and neglect eroded trust. Armed groups plagued the countryside. Farmers abandoned their fields, and young people, restless with despair, dreamed of escape instead of belonging. Yet out of this chaos, a young captain answered not only the call of the barracks, but also the call of his people. When he spoke, his words carried no emptiness, no rehearsed political theater. They carried fire, fire rooted in truth, fire that struck the conscience of every Burkinabe man and woman. His message was simple yet powerful. Burkina Faso must belong to its people, not to the dictates of foreign powers or the greedy hands of local elites. This clarity, this bold defiance, resonated deeply because it was authentic. From the day he stepped forward, he symbolized a generational awakening. He did not hide behind diplomacy when sovereignty was being trampled. He did not sugarcoat the harsh realities of war when citizens were being slaughtered in their villages. He did not wait for permission to act when the nation's survival was at stake. He understood that the first duty of leadership is protection, the safeguarding of the people, the land, and the future. The young and the old alike looked to him with hope. For the young, he became a mirror of their frustration, but also a mirror of their potential. He proved that leadership does not come only with gray hair or decades in politics. It comes with courage, integrity, and an unyielding heart. For the elders, he rekindled the spirit of the nation's past revolutionaries, reminding them of the days when leaders dared to stand tall against colonial masters and carve their own destiny. But his rise did not come without enemies. To foreign capitals, his defiance was intolerable. They preferred African leaders who bowed, who signed away resources without protest, who treated sovereignty as a ceremonial word rather than a lived reality. His refusal to play that role made him a target. Sanctions, propaganda, and whispers of destabilization circled him like vultures, yet he stood firm, reminding the world that Burkina Faso would not be intimidated into submission. For him, sovereignty was not just a slogan, it was a shield for his people. It meant control over the country's resources, its land, its skies, and its choices. It meant that decisions about development, security, and governance should be made in Ouagadougou, not dictated from Paris, Washington, or any foreign capital. His vision was not isolation, but partnership built on equality, not hierarchy. Security was the first battlefield. Villages were burning, citizens fleeing, and children growing up in fear. He knew words alone could not defeat terror. Action was required, swift, disciplined, and decisive. Under his leadership, the military transformed from a force of hesitation into a force of resolve. Soldiers became protectors, not distant figures. Operations were launched with precision, not recklessness, with one goal: to reclaim every inch of Burkina Faso for its people. In this fight, technology was embraced not as a luxury but as a necessity. Drones, intelligence, and new strategies reshaped the battlefield. Militants who once terrorized with impunity suddenly found themselves hunted, outmatched, and outmaneuvered. The message was clear: Burkina Faso would not kneel before chaos. Yet his vision extended beyond the battlefield. He knew that bullets alone could not plant seeds of lasting peace. This is why he placed immense focus on agriculture and self-reliance. For too long, Burkina Faso had been trapped in the vicious cycle of dependence, importing food it could grow, importing energy it could harness, importing ideas it could create. He insisted that the nation's soil, rich and fertile, could feed its people. He urged citizens to plant, to harvest, to reclaim their pride as producers, not beggars. He knew that true independence is measured not only in flags and anthems, but in bread baked from one's own grain. The struggle for self-reliance also extended to energy. How could a land blessed with sun and wind remain dependent on foreign oil and electricity imports? He envisioned solar panels illuminating villages, dams powering industries, and innovations sparking a renaissance of African solutions for African needs. His leadership reawakened the spirit of possibility in a people long told they were too poor, too weak, too small. But his greatest power lay not in weapons or policies, it lay in unity. He reminded the people that divisions of tribe, religion, and region were tools of their enemies. He called for one Burkina Faso, one people, one destiny. When citizens saw their leader living simply, speaking directly, and risking his life alongside soldiers, they recognized authenticity. He was not asking them to sacrifice what he himself would not. Internationally, his message resonated across the continent, from Dakar to Dar es Salaam, from Kinshasa to Khartoum. Young Africans echoed his defiance. They saw in him not just a Burkinabe leader, but a continental symbol. He represented the Africa that was tired of lectures, tired of exploitation, tired of watching its children drown in the Mediterranean. In search of dignity, his voice was their voice. His struggle was their struggle. Of course, challenges remain immense. Militants still lurk in shadows, poverty still weighs on families, and foreign powers still conspire. But something irreversible has begun, a spirit of resistance, of rebirth, of renaissance. The people of Burkina Faso have tasted the dignity of standing upright, and no force on earth can make them bend again. This leader has become both shield and sword, protecting his people and striking down falsehoods. He has also become a teacher, reminding Africans that freedom is never granted, it is taken, guarded, and renewed each generation. His example proves that leadership is not about age, titles, or wealth. It is about service, courage, and sacrifice. And so, when one asks who leads Burkina Faso today, the answer is not only a name but a story of defiance, of sovereignty, of hope. The answer is a vision, one where Africans reclaim their place in the world, not as dependents but as equals, not as pawns but as players, not as victims but as victors. This story is still being written. Each day, new battles are fought, new sacrifices are made, and new victories are won. But what is certain is this: Burkina Faso has entered a new chapter, led by a generation unafraid to say no when dignity is threatened, unafraid to say yes when unity is required, unafraid to stand tall even in the face of giants. The world may conspire, but the spirit of a people determined to be free is unstoppable. And in Burkina Faso, that spirit is alive, burning brightly, carrying not only the dreams of one nation, but the dreams of a continent yearning for justice, for dignity, and for true independence. Sovereignty first. Leadership means ensuring decisions for Burkina Faso are made in Burkina Faso, not dictated by foreign powers. Independence is lived, not symbolic. Defender of the people, true leadership begins with protection, securing villages, reclaiming land, and ensuring citizens can live without fear of terror. Self-reliance as power, agriculture, energy, and innovation are keys to real freedom. A nation that feeds and powers itself cannot be controlled by outsiders. Unity as a weapon, divisions of tribe, religion, or region weaken a people. Only unity, forged through shared struggle, ensures strength against enemies within and without. Symbol of a continental awakening, beyond Burkina Faso, his example inspires young Africans across the continent to reject dependency and reclaim dignity as equals on the world stage. Would you like me to expand each of these into 400 words like we did earlier with other themes, so you have a series of ready-to-use speeches? Sovereignty is not a word to be thrown around lightly. It is the heartbeat of a people's dignity, the very essence of a nation's right to exist freely. For far too long, decisions that shape the lives of millions across Africa have been whispered in distant capitals, written in offices thousands of miles away, and enforced with strings attached to loans, aid, and promises that rarely serve the people. But sovereignty demands a different path. It calls for a bold declaration that the future of a nation must be written by the hands of its own citizens, not dictated by foreign interests or external masters. True sovereignty means more than a flag, an anthem, or the borders drawn on a map. It means the power to decide one's destiny without compromise. In Burkina Faso, the idea of sovereignty comes alive in the rejection of dependency and the embrace of self-reliance. It is visible in the effort to build institutions that are accountable to the people, not to foreign creditors. It is evident in the pursuit of policies designed to defend land, protect farmers, and secure natural resources so that the wealth of the nation fuels development for its children rather than profits for outsiders. Sovereignty first is not isolation, it is empowerment. It means engaging with the world as equals, not as subordinates, and saying yes to cooperation only when it respects the dignity of the people. Sovereignty is also a shield, for without it, the strongest walls of defense collapse from within. A nation that cannot defend its choices is a nation always at the mercy of others. That is why sovereignty begins with securing peace, ensuring that the people live free from fear of terror or invasion, and reclaiming every corner of the land for those who call it home. It is not merely about military strength but about psychological freedom, the ability of the people to believe that their voice matters more than the approval of foreign powers. When sovereignty comes first, dignity follows. When sovereignty is defended, development becomes possible. When sovereignty is respected, unity grows. For a people who stand tall in their sovereignty, no outside force, no threat, and no deception can strip away their destiny. Sovereignty first is not just a principle, it is survival, it is pride, and it is the promise of a future built by the people, for the people, and with the people at its center. A true leader is measured not by titles, medals, or the power they command, but by the way they defend their people. In times of crisis, when villages are under attack, when farmers abandon their fields in fear, when families are forced to flee their homes, leadership is not about speeches in grand halls. It is about protection. The people must feel that someone stands between them and the forces that seek to destroy their lives. To be a defender of the people is to embody the role of a shield, a guardian who prioritizes the safety, dignity, and survival of the nation above all else. For Burkina Faso, this means standing firm against the scourge of terrorism that has for years spread fear across its borders. Entire communities have been displaced, schools closed, and livelihoods shattered because of attacks from groups that thrive on chaos. To defend the people is to reverse this reality. To ensure children return to classrooms, families return to their lands, and markets once again flourish with trade. It is not an easy task, but it is the first duty of leadership. Without security, no talk of development, prosperity, or progress can hold any weight. Protection is the foundation on which everything else is built. Yet defending the people goes beyond the battlefield. It also means defending them from exploitation, whether by those who plunder resources under unfair contracts, or those who use aid as a tool of control. A leader who is a defender of the people must guard against external pressures that treat citizens as pawns in a global game of power. It is a constant struggle to say no to arrangements that enrich a few and impoverish the many, but it is a necessary fight if sovereignty is to be preserved. The defender of the people must also protect their spirit. In times of hardship, despair can weaken a nation more than bullets. That is why it is vital to inspire resilience, to remind every citizen that they are not alone, that their suffering has been seen, and that their sacrifices are not in vain. A people who know they are defended will rise with courage and hope. Self-reliance is the cornerstone of true independence. A nation that depends entirely on others for its food, its energy, and its future can never call itself free, no matter how many flags it raises or anthems it sings. Power lies not in borrowed strength, but in the ability to stand on one's own feet. For Burkina Faso, and for Africa as a whole, self-reliance is not just an option, it is a necessity if dignity and sovereignty are to be preserved. The ability to feed the people is the first measure of independence. A nation that cannot produce enough food is at the mercy of those who control its imports. That is why self-reliance begins with agriculture, empowering farmers, modernizing techniques, and reclaiming fertile lands from the grip of fear ensures that no child goes hungry because of foreign shortages or exploitative prices. Each grain harvested locally is more than sustenance, it is an act of freedom. Energy is another battlefield of sovereignty. Nations that rely on others for electricity, fuel, and infrastructure remain chained by dependency. True power comes when villages are lit by their own resources, be it solar, hydro, or local innovation, rather than waiting for foreign suppliers to dictate their survival. Every watt generated at home is a spark of liberation, reducing the weight of outside influence. Self-reliance also means taking control of resources. Too often, gold, cotton, and other treasures have left Burkina Faso's soil only to enrich distant capitals, while the people who work the land remain in poverty. Real power comes when wealth serves the nation first, creating schools, hospitals, and opportunities for its own citizens. When the wealth of the land fuels the progress of the people, dependency becomes a relic of the past. But self-reliance is not isolation. It does not mean cutting off the world, but rather engaging with it on equal terms. Partnerships should be built from a position of strength, not desperation. A self-reliant nation chooses cooperation, not subjugation. It decides when to say yes and when to say no, because it has built the capacity to sustain itself if it must stand alone. Self-reliance is therefore not just about economics, it is about identity. It is about telling every child born in the land that they inherit not chains, but choices. It is about building a future where no foreign power holds the keys to survival. In this truth lies the greatest power of all. The power of a nation that refuses to beg and instead rises, strong and unyielding, on its own. Unity is the most powerful weapon a people can wield, greater than any arsenal of machines or stockpile of arms. Throughout history, empires have fallen not because of the strength of their enemies, but because of the divisions within their own ranks. Unity is not simply the absence of conflict, it is the deliberate choice to see one another as brothers and sisters in a shared struggle. It is the farmer in the countryside knowing that the soldier in the city bleeds for his freedom, and the soldier knowing that the farmer's harvest feeds his strength. Unity bridges the gap between the village and the capital, between the educated and the uneducated, between the young and the old. In this bond, a fortress is built, one that cannot be broken by drones, bullets, or propaganda. Enemies of freedom understand this truth. That is why they sow division. They whisper lies to separate communities, to turn neighbor against neighbor, to make people forget that they share the same destiny. But those who remain vigilant recognize that these are tactics of control. Division is the enemy's weapon. Unity is the people's defense. By choosing solidarity, the nation disarms the schemes of those who wish to dominate it. Unity also gives strength in building the future. Development is not the work of a single group, but the collective effort of all. Schools, hospitals, roads, and industries rise faster when citizens contribute as one body. Unity transforms diversity into an advantage, combining the wisdom of elders, the energy of youth, the discipline of soldiers, and the resilience of farmers into a force of progress. Above all, unity is spiritual power. It is the belief that no matter how many challenges come, no matter how strong the external pressure, a united people can never be conquered. As long as the people hold fast to one another, they hold fast to freedom itself. And when unity becomes the nation's strongest weapon, no foreign influence, no militant threat, and no imperial design can overcome the will of a people determined to live free. Across the African continent, a new spirit is rising, a spirit that refuses to bow, refuses to accept the chains of dependency, and refuses to see Africa only through the eyes of others. This awakening is not born in conference rooms of foreign capitals, but in the hearts of farmers, workers, students, and soldiers who know that Africa's destiny is its own. It is an awakening that sees the struggles of one nation as tied to the struggles of all, because no single country can be truly free while others remain under the shadow of exploitation and manipulation. The courage of one leader or one nation can serve as a spark that lights the flame of resistance in others. When one people refuse to bend before the pressures of foreign powers, it gives courage to neighboring lands to also rise, to also question why their resources are drained while their children go hungry, why decisions about their future are made in distant capitals instead of in their own assemblies. This shared defiance becomes a continental echo, a chorus that grows louder with every voice that joins. The awakening is also intellectual. Africa is no longer satisfied with ideas imposed from the outside, from Dakar to Nairobi, from Ouagadougou to Johannesburg. Thinkers, activists, and youth movements are reclaiming the right to define progress, democracy, and freedom on African terms. They are questioning institutions that have long acted as instruments of foreign dominance and imagining systems rooted in African values, African dignity, and African aspirations. But this awakening is not only about defiance, it is about creation. It seeks to build industries that transform raw resources into finished goods, to establish schools that teach the history of Africa as proudly as they teach the sciences, to design economic models that prioritize citizens over creditors, and to forge alliances between nations that respect sovereignty rather than exploit it. This is the true power of the awakening. It does not stop at saying no to oppression, but goes further in building a strong yes to African futures. The world is watching, and some are afraid. For centuries, Africa has been treated as a land to be taken from, divided, and controlled. But today a new reality emerges, a continent uniting, a people awakening, and a future being written not by foreign powers, but by Africans themselves. This awakening is unstoppable because it lives in the hearts of millions who now know that dignity and freedom are their birthright.